She was just the cleaning lady, until a billionaire tried to buy her silence with $100 bill. What he didn't know? She had 2 degrees, a hidden identity, and a plan that would bring his empire to its knees. This is the explosive true story of Ariana Bell, a woman who turned humiliation into power and exposed a legacy of corruption from the inside out. Her journey will leave you speechless and inspired. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove courage always rises. The marble floor gleamed under the golden chandeliers of the Royce Foundation Gala, an annual event where LA's wealthiest gathered under the pretense of philanthropy while sipping $1,000 champagne and exchanging favors worth millions. Ariana Bell, crouched in a corner with a cleaning rag in hand, was invisible to most. To the elite, she blended into the decor, just another woman in a blue janitorial uniform, mopping up after the powerful. That night, as the orchestra played a muted waltz and diamonds danced on the necks of heiresses, Ariana scrubbed a crimson stain left by a toppled glass of Bordeaux, her posture composed, her mind far from submissive. "So you're one of the special girls for after the party?" The voice cut through the music like a razor. It was Julian Royce, 30 years old, sharp-jawed, and sharper-tongued, heir to Royce Holdings and the golden boy of the city's business elite. He wore arrogance as naturally as his black tuxedo. The Rolex on his wrist gleamed almost as brightly as the smugness in his eyes. Ariana looked up slowly, her dark eyes meeting his. She recognized the tone immediately, coated in entitlement, steeped in power, owned through generations of unchecked privilege. Her heart pounded, but her expression remained unreadable. "I'm here as a cleaner, sir," she said calmly, dipping the rag once more into her bucket. "Not entertainment." Julian chuckled, adjusting the cuffs of his tux. "That's even better. The discreet ones are always more interesting." He leaned down slightly, lowering his voice as if to make the moment more intimate, though anyone paying attention could still hear. "They told me there'd be some extra services for donors," he said. "What's your rate for the night? Or are you one of those girls who plays hard to get until the tips start showing?" Ariana straightened to her full height, not tall, but composed, regal even in that plain uniform. Around them, no one stepped in. Some guests smirked, others whispered. A couple of socialites shared a glance, one raising an eyebrow in amusement. A senator's wife sipped her drink and looked the other way. Ariana's silence stretched until Julian laughed again. "Relax," he said, pulling a crisp $100 bill from his wallet. "Here, consider it a deposit. If you change your mind, I'm in the penthouse at the Four Seasons, room 510. Knock twice." She didn't take the money, didn't even look at it. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice firm but not raised. "I'm here to maintain the venue, not to entertain your fantasies." Julian's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to being refused, especially not by someone who wore rubber gloves and kneeled to wipe his guests' spills. His smirk curled with disdain. "You don't need to be so dramatic," he said. "You should be grateful anyone's even looking at you in that uniform." A few men nearby chuckled. "Classic Julian," one muttered. "Always direct." Another replied. Ariana felt the heat rise in her chest, not from shame but from a fire she'd learned long ago to keep banked. She looked him square in the eye. "Thank you for the offer," she said, her tone unnervingly calm. "But I have principles that don't come with a price tag." The words lingered in the air, as still and potent as lightning before a storm. Something in Julian's smirk faltered, if only for a second. The way she stood, the educated cadence of her voice, the unflinching steadiness in her eyes, it didn't fit the role he had scripted for her. A cleaner wasn't supposed to look at him like an equal. "You got a smart mouth for someone wiping wine off a floor," he muttered, stuffing the bill back into his wallet with exaggerated care. "You'll regret not taking that offer." Ariana didn't flinch. "I've regretted worse," she said, and turned back to her work. Julian scoffed and walked away, joining a group of laughing executives, his voice louder than necessary. "Gotta love how some people forget their place," he quipped. "They think because they read a book or two, they're suddenly equals." The laughter that followed cut through Ariana sharper than the wine's scent. But she didn't show it. She picked up her bucket, moved to another corner, and quietly resumed her task. But her fingers were tight around the mop handle. her knuckles pale. The fire inside her was no longer hidden, it was awake. What Julian Royce didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Ariana Bell was no ordinary cleaning lady. By day, she ran Bell Strategic Intelligence, a boutique corporate investigations firm with clients that included 2 Fortune 500 companies. She had degrees in business analytics and forensic accounting, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had built her life on a foundation of silence, study, and strategic patience. Her cleaning uniform wasn't her job, it was her camouflage. She hadn't just come to this gala for money. She'd come for data. And Julian Royce had just given her far more than she expected. As she wheeled her cart to the service exit, Ariana caught sight of herself in a mirror hanging in the hallway. The uniform, the gloves, the lowered gaze she'd worn like armor for years. But beneath that reflection was someone else entirely, someone who had seen behind the velvet curtain and now had a reason to pull it down. In the staff locker room, she removed her gloves and opened her purse. Inside was a discreet voice recorder, tucked into a pocket sewn beneath the lining. She pressed stop. The entire exchange was saved, every arrogant word captured in crystal clarity. She plugged the recorder into her phone and uploaded the audio to a secure cloud folder labeled Target Royce. She changed quickly into jeans and a hoodie, blending into the late-night city crowd. As she walked through the parking lot toward her car, she passed 2 women who had been giggling at her earlier. They didn't recognize her now. She was invisible again. Just how she liked it. Driving back to her modest apartment in Inglewood, Ariana replayed the scene in her mind, not with bitterness, but calculation. Julian wasn't just cruel, he was reckless. And if there was one thing Ariana had learned after years of watching men like him, arrogance always left a trail. All she needed to do was follow it. By the time she reached home, she had already compiled a mental checklist. Review audio, cross-reference Royce Holdings' current financial disclosures, dig into offshore account rumors she had heard whispered at another event 2 months ago, reach out to a contact at the Labor Justice Coalition. The wheels were turning, but not for revenge, not exactly. This was bigger. This was about power, and how easily it was abused when no one held the abuser accountable. Ariana had built her life around being underestimated. It gave her access. It gave her information. But tonight it had given her something more, motive. She sat at her desk in her tiny office, surrounded by case files and dual monitors. On one screen, Royce Holdings' stock ticker blinked in green. On the other, she began creating a digital evidence board labeled Case R. She smiled, not out of malice, but with purpose. Julian Royce had mistaken her for the help. He had no idea she had just become his reckoning. The morning after the gala broke over Los Angeles like any other. Pale sunlight spilling across high-rise glass, baristas calling out names at overpriced cafes, and the traffic humming its eternal dirge down Wilshire. But inside a modest third-floor walk-up in Inglewood, the world had shifted forever for Ariana Bell. She sat barefoot on the edge of her futon, her laptop open in her lap, the pale blue light from the screen illuminating the storm behind her eyes. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, untouched. Her inbox was open, the subject line of a new message blinking like a red flag. Incident report, Royce Foundation event. The sender was Jennifer Phelps, Ariana's contract supervisor at Clean Bright Services. Jennifer was usually kind, efficient. They didn't talk much, but Ariana had once helped her cover a weekend shift when her daughter had pneumonia. Now her email was tight, apologetic. Ariana, I'm so sorry, but I've been instructed to remove you from all high-profile events moving forward. Someone from Royce Holdings called early this morning. They said you made a guest uncomfortable. I don't agree with this, but my hands are tied. Please understand. No signature, no pleasantries, just the cold slap of power in motion. Ariana closed the laptop with a click that echoed through her quiet apartment. She stood slowly, walked to the narrow kitchen, and rinsed out her mug. The water ran too long, but she didn't notice. She was remembering another voice, one that had sounded eerily like Julian's, but harsher, older, and filled with the same rotting confidence. She was 16 when it happened. Her mother, Melinda, had worked for the Holloways in Brentwood for over a decade. She cooked, cleaned, raised their children, while her own daughter studied in a cramped room above the garage. One night, Ariana had come home from her shift at the corner diner and found her mother sitting on the front steps, her hands shaking, her eyes dull with a fury that hadn't yet found its name. "He offered me $500, Melinda said softly, to stay late. Not for cleaning." Ariana had stood frozen, a brown paper bag of leftover fries in her hands. When Melinda refused, the man fired her the next day. Claimed she stole his wife's necklace. No police, of course. Just humiliation. Just erasure. They lost the job, the housing, the safety net. Ariana remembered sitting in the back seat of a borrowed car, watching the Holloway's driveway disappear behind them as her mother clutched a plastic bag of folded uniforms to her chest. That was the night Ariana decided never to be powerless again. Now, over a decade later, the same flavor of cruelty had come back in a newer suit, a younger face, a silkier voice, and it thought it could silence her again. But she wasn't a child anymore. She opened the drawer of her small desk and pulled out a worn leather-bound folder labeled Bell Strategic. Inside were laminated business cards, encrypted USB drives, and documents with names that powerful men had paid good money to keep hidden. She pulled her laptop back onto the desk, booted up her secure investigative software, and brought up the Royce Holdings file she'd started 3 weeks ago. She hadn't expected Julian himself to be the linchpin, but fate had a flair for irony. Originally, she'd picked Royce Holdings because of a tip from a whistleblower in their logistics department, something about manipulated contract values and ghost payments. But the evidence had been murky, the trail cold. Until now, Julian Royce had not only relit the fuse, he'd handed her the matches. She typed rapidly, refining her timeline. November 3rd, Gala incident, verbal harassment, public humiliation. November 4, blacklisted by Cleanbright Services via Royce Holdings pressure. November 4th, evening, audio evidence uploaded to secure server. She leaned back and took a deep breath. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. But she needed a plan. First, she would consolidate everything she already had. Audio recordings, photos from past events, even expense report anomalies she'd flagged from Royce's financial disclosures. Then she'd activate her network. Discreet allies in media, law, and labor regulation who owed her favors or shared her passion for justice. A text came through on her burner phone, a random number with a single line. "You good?" She smiled faintly. It was from Deshawn, her most trusted tech analyst. He didn't know what had happened last night yet, but somehow he always sensed the tremors. She responded, "Gonna drop a case on you. Big one. We'll need encrypted everything." His reply came seconds later. "Thought you'd never ask." She turned her focus to the wall beside her desk where a whiteboard stood mostly blank until now. She picked up a black marker and wrote in careful block letters, Julian Royce. Below that, she wrote, abuse of power, harassment, blacklisting, financial misconduct, pattern of discrimination. This wasn't personal vengeance. This was a strategic takedown. Ariana knew better than to come at a man like Julian with emotion. He would weaponize it, turn it into a scorned maid's revenge story. No. She would come at him the way she'd come at every corrupt executive who'd underestimated her, like an analyst, like an investigator, like a ghost with a flashlight. She needed to move fast but precise. She spent the rest of the day combing through public records, collecting press mentions of Julian, watching past interviews. She paused on one particular clip, a CNBC feature titled The Billionaire Disruptor. In it, Julian sat sprawled across a leather chair, his voice syrupy and confident as he discussed innovation, market control, and people management. At one point, he laughed and said, "You want to win? Don't play fair, play smart." She clicked pause, her reflection caught faintly in the screen. "You want to win?" she whispered. "Watch me." That evening, she changed into all black, tied her curls into a bun and headed out, not to a gala, but to a downtown co-working space where a woman named Miriam ran a nonprofit legal archive. Ariana had once helped Miriam expose a fraudulent insurance scheme involving public school pensions. Miriam owed her. "Hey, Ari," she said, welcoming her with a long hug. "You need firepower or files?" "Both," Ariana replied. "I'm taking down a Royce." Miriam blinked. "The Julian Royce?" Ariana's silence was her answer. Miriam opened the door wider. "Come in. You're gonna need coffee." By midnight, Ariana had acquired everything she needed. Digital access to Royce Holdings' last 3 years of public and internal-facing financial records, lists of employee complaints filed and withdrawn, and, most importantly, documents detailing contracts signed with state officials. The files were bloated with discrepancies, overinflated budgets, third-party contractors who didn't seem to exist, department heads with matching surnames. Corruption didn't just run in circles, it paraded. By the time Ariana made it home, dawn was curling over the horizon. She dropped her bag, peeled off her shoes, and stared at the whiteboard again. This time, she added a new line beneath Julian's name. He picked the wrong woman. And then she crossed out the word maid. Not because she was ashamed of the work, but because it no longer served as a disguise. Tomorrow, she would begin reaching out, strategically. She'd start with Anthony Lang, the civil rights lawyer she'd seen at a conference last year. He'd taken down a hedge fund CEO over systemic gender discrimination and had a sharp eye for patterns. She would give him the data, not all of it, just enough to reel him in. Once he bit, she'd reveal the rest, but not before she was ready. Ariana Bell had spent years learning how to be invisible, how to pass through marble corridors without leaving footprints. Now, she was preparing to leave an imprint no one could ignore. Julian Royce thought he could erase her with a phone call. He was about to find out what happens when the ghost in the room picks up a sword. The Royce Holdings networking mixer was held on the 23rd floor of the Stanton Tower, a skyscraper with sweeping views of downtown Los Angeles and ceilings so high they seemed to float. It was the kind of room where glass clinked politely, smiles were practiced, and deals worth millions were sealed between sips of aged scotch. It was also the kind of room where Ariana Bell had learned to disappear. She stood near the bar, dressed in a crisp black and white caterer's uniform with a silver tray balanced on her fingers. The name tag on her chest read, Tina. Her posture was perfect, her gaze respectfully lowered, just another face hired through a third-party staffing agency for the evening. She moved through the room with quiet grace, offering flutes of champagne to people who didn't look her in the eye, which was exactly the way she liked it. To them, she was invisible. But to Ariana, they were all suddenly in full view. Julian Royce was holding court in the center of the lounge, laughing too loudly, gesturing with a confidence that didn't need permission. He wore his reputation like a tailored suit, flawless, gleaming, and stitched in secrets. Around him, a circle of CEOs, tech investors, and real estate moguls nodded along as if every word he said was gospel. Ariana didn't need to get close. She already had 3 audio recorders hidden throughout the room. One behind the dessert table, one in a floral centerpiece, and one discreetly taped beneath the podium. She knew how these men talked when they thought no one was listening. The jokes, the offhand remarks, the names they dropped like war trophies. It was all evidence waiting to be compiled. But she wasn't just here for Julian. She was here for someone else. She caught sight of him near the back of the room, sipping ginger ale from a short glass, his expression unreadable. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a navy suit that didn't try too hard. His presence was quiet but anchored, someone who had spent years in rooms like this but never let the rooms define him. Anthony Lang. Ariana had been following his work for months. A civil rights attorney known for going toe-to-toe with powerful corporations, he'd built a reputation as a man who didn't flinch. He'd once described his litigation strategy as a scalpel dressed like a hammer. She respected that. More importantly, she needed it. She waited until he moved toward the hallway leading to the restrooms, then slipped away from the bar and intercepted him as he turned the corner. She made sure her voice was low, her posture unthreatening. "Excuse me," she said, adjusting the tray in her hands as if by accident. "Mr. Lang?" He paused mid-step, turning to face her with a slight frown. His eyes scanned her uniform, then returned to her face. There was curiosity in his gaze, but also caution. "Yes? I need 2 minutes of your time," she said. "Not here. Somewhere private. I have information about Royce Holdings." That got his attention. He tilted his head, evaluating. "And who exactly are you?" he asked carefully. She reached into her pocket and produced a business card. Plain white, no title, just a name and a number. "Ariana Bell," she said. "Call that number tomorrow. Ask for Iris." He stared at the card for a moment. Then, without a word, he slipped it into his jacket and walked away. Ariana exhaled. The rest of the evening passed in slow motion. Julian made more crude jokes, one of which involved a comment about diversity hires being like decorative napkins. They look good on tables, but you throw them out when they get dirty. Laughter followed. Ariana didn't even blink. She was recording. As the guests began to filter out and the cleaning crew rolled in, she retrieved the audio devices and slipped into the service elevator. By the time she got back to her apartment, it was well past midnight, but she didn't sleep. She played the audio back with headphones on, taking notes with meticulous precision. Each timestamp marked a comment, a pattern, a potential violation. But her mind kept drifting to Anthony Lang. She didn't know if he'd call, but she knew she'd given him enough to spark interest. Lawyers like Lang didn't waste time with empty leads, and if he did his homework, he'd find her hidden digital fingerprints on several class action lawsuits that had dismantled companies twice the size of Royce Holdings. He would know she wasn't bluffing. The next morning, the call came. Her burner phone vibrated once on the desk. She answered immediately, her voice steady. "This is Iris." "Miss Bell," the voice said. "I looked you up." She smiled. "Then I assume you have questions." "I have about 50, he replied. "But let's start with one. What exactly do you have on Julian Royce?" Ariana didn't answer right away. She walked to her living room window, looking out at the city below. The skyline shimmered in the morning sun, clean, pristine, beautiful from afar. "Enough," she said, "to make the world see who he really is." There was a pause. "Can we meet?" "Yes," she replied. "But not in any of your usual spots. I'll text you the address. Come alone. No assistants, no interns." "I don't work with interns." "Good." She ended the call and immediately texted an address to a quiet cafe in mid-city, one with no cameras, no media buzz, and a back corner booth that faced both entrances. She arrived early, dressed in jeans and a gray sweater, her curls loose for once, her expression unreadable. Anthony arrived right on time. He slid into the booth and offered a nod. No handshake, just quiet acknowledgement. "I've dealt with a lot of whistleblowers," he said. "You don't seem scared." "I'm not," she replied. "But I am careful." She placed a manila folder on the table and pushed it toward him. Inside were copies of internal emails from Royce Holdings' executive team. Emails that casually discussed streamlining ethnic hires, slashing maternity benefits, and using shell companies for inflated federal contracts. There were also screenshots from Julian's private social media account, deleted posts preserved by Ariana's web capture software. One of them read, "There's an order to society. Those who understand it rise. Those who don't, they mop floors." Anthony didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was low. "Do you have originals?" "I have the drive," she said. "But that's just the beginning." He looked up. "There's more?" "I've been embedded for 8 weeks," she said. "Different identities, different events. I've recorded 32 hours of conversations, mapped out their contractor shell game, traced the PAC money funneling back to Royce's campaign slush fund." He leaned back, visibly impressed. "That's not just evidence, that's a warhead." She met his eyes without blinking. "Then let's aim it." He nodded slowly. "I'll need to bring in a small legal team, trusted, quiet." "No paper trail," she said. "And I want full visibility." "You'll have it." They shook hands. As he left, she felt something shift inside her. Not relief, but motion. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about momentum. Ariana had built her life in the shadows, but now she was stepping into the light, not for herself, but for every woman who'd ever been told to smile and stay quiet, for every black girl who'd been told to know her place. She wasn't just going to expose Julian. She was going to rewrite the rules. That night, she opened her encrypted file labeled Project Signal. Inside were layers of data she'd yet to unpack. But she also opened a blank document, and at the top typed, "Final Report, Royce Holdings, prepared by A. Bell." Then beneath it, "Status in progress." The next 48 hours blurred into a steady rhythm of caffeine, code, and quiet rage. Ariana Bell had always been a patient hunter. She didn't rush justice. She built it brick by brick, bite by bite. With Anthony Lang now on board and a preliminary review of evidence completed, she had what she needed to escalate. The pieces weren't just aligning, they were accelerating. She sat cross-legged on her living room floor, the hum of her 2 monitors creating a soft background score. The lights were off, the room lit only by the cool glow of spreadsheets, chat windows, and PDF scans. Her wall whiteboard had evolved from a name scrawled in black marker into an intricate mind map. Circles, arrows, color-coded threads connecting board members, lobbying money, and fraudulent subsidiaries. Julian Royce's empire wasn't just unethical, it was rotten to the core. Ariana clicked through a sequence of internal documents she'd acquired via her contact in Royce Holdings' IT department, an underpaid and overlooked systems engineer named Jamie Tran. 2 weeks earlier, Ariana had discreetly helped Jamie's brother resolve a visa issue, and in return, Jamie had given her limited access to archived company servers through a virtual backdoor. It was risky. But Ariana never asked for more than what was already there, buried beneath layers of bureaucratic negligence and arrogance. She opened a folder labeled Consultant Expenses Confidential 2021. Inside were scanned receipts and invoices from shell companies Ariana had already flagged, names like Westbridge Systems, Aurora Analytics, and Civic One. These were all allegedly external vendors for Royce Holdings' strategic compliance projects, but the documents told a different story. Invoices were padded with line items that made no sense: $78,000 for conflict mediation beverages, $160,000 for inclusive leadership retreat decor. It was money laundering, but dressed in HR buzzwords. Ariana cross-referenced the transactions with public expenditure reports and PAC donations. One trail led to a fake scholarship fund used to funnel donations to Julian's personal political PAC. Another looped back to a luxury resort in Aspen, booked under the name of Royce's COO during a supposed diversity summit. She wasn't just compiling evidence, she was preparing an indictment. By noon, she had drafted a summary of findings for Anthony's team. The email was simple. Subject: Royce, Phase 2, Attachments, Expense Pattern Summary, Shell Company Network Map. Redacted witness statements 3. Let me know when you're ready for the deeper cut. 10 minutes later, her phone lit up. Jesus Christ, Anthony's voice came through, tight with disbelief. Are these real? Every dollar, Ariana said, every memo, every misused fund, and that's before we touch the employee side. He exhaled audibly. I showed this to Candace, our senior counsel. She nearly choked. If this goes public. It will, Ariana said, but not yet. You've done enough to burn the whole tower down. No, I've done enough to get the media's attention. We're not aiming for flames, we're aiming for structural collapse. There was a silence on the line. Then Anthony said, What's next? I need access to the HR complaint archive, she said, the one that's allegedly confidential and sealed. Jamie says the access is locked behind a physical two-factor device, probably in Royce's private office. You think you can get in? Ariana paused. I don't think, she said. I know. 2 nights later, Ariana stood in the shadows of Royce Tower's underground parking garage, dressed not in a cleaner's uniform this time, but in tailored black slacks, a slim jacket, and sneakers. She blended in perfectly with the cleaning crew clocking out, except she wasn't leaving. Her fake security badge buzzed quietly as she slipped past the first checkpoint using a cloned access card Jamie had prepped for her. The building was quiet at midnight. The executive floor smelled like lemon polish and entitlement. Ariana moved with practiced ease, bypassing cameras by hugging blind spots she had mapped out weeks ago. When she reached Julian's office, she paused. The door was locked with a biometric pad, just as expected. She pulled out a slim device and attached it to the panel. It blinked red once, then green. Inside, the office was predictably opulent. Mahogany shelves, a fireplace no one used, leather furniture that looked better than it felt. She walked straight to the desk, opened the top drawer and found it. The Royce Sec authentication fob. She plugged it into her tablet and launched the custom decryptor Deshawn had written for her. Within seconds, the HR archive opened like a confession booth. The files were damning. One by one, Ariana read them. Complaints from former employees, mostly women, mostly people of color. Reports of harassment brushed aside, promotions denied, managers using racial slurs in meetings and calling it office banter. Several complaints directly mentioned Julian, some detailing inappropriate comments, others alleging retaliation for speaking out. All closed, all labeled unsubstantiated. She downloaded everything. Before she left, she placed a note on Julian's desk, handwritten, unsigned, but unmistakable. Truth doesn't knock, it breaks the door. By the time she exited the building, her backpack held the final piece. 3 days later, Ariana and Anthony met in a private legal office in Pasadena. The room was small but secure. Candace, Anthony's lead counsel, sat across from Ariana with a poker face and a legal pad. "What you have," Candace said slowly, flipping through the latest files, "isn't just a case of corporate misconduct. It's a pattern of willful abuse, systemic discrimination, and financial fraud. This is federal. This is criminal." Ariana nodded. "That's why we're going public." "You're sure?" "I've been sure since he handed me that $100 bill." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Anthony spoke. "We file the lawsuit next Monday. We'll hold the press conference Wednesday morning. You can choose to appear anonymously or go public." Ariana didn't hesitate. "I'm going public." Candace raised an eyebrow. "You'll be attacked. You'll be questioned." "I've spent my entire life being questioned," Ariana replied. "It's time they get some answers." As she stood to leave, Candace extended her hand. "You're not just taking down a man," she said. "You're changing the system." "I know," Ariana replied, shaking her hand. "And that's the point." That night, Ariana returned home and stood in front of her window. Below her, the city pulsed with light and noise and beautiful contradictions. Somewhere in a penthouse not far away, Julian Royce probably sipped wine and congratulated himself for putting a maid in her place. He had no idea that the woman he tried to erase was about to make him infamous. She didn't smile. Not yet. She just opened her laptop, clicked send on the final evidence drop, and whispered to herself, "Let the fall begin." Julian Royce stood on the rooftop of the Monarch Club, Manhattan Beach's most exclusive seaside lounge, holding a crystal tumbler of bourbon he hadn't paid for, and grinning like a man who believed the universe existed to decorate his whims. The salt air fluttered through the collar of his navy silk shirt, open just enough to hint at tan lines earned on his yacht. He was surrounded by people who smiled when he smirked, laughed when he scoffed, and leaned in as though proximity to his wealth might give them a hint of his power. Ariana Bell watched it all from the corner of the rooftop, unnoticed in her tailored catering uniform, her eyes scanning the crowd like a data processor. A small earpiece nestled in her left ear buzzed quietly. Anthony's voice, low and focused, came through. "Audio's clean. You're live." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her focus was absolute. Julian raised his glass toward a circle of influencers and trust fund heirs, launching into another story. "So I say to the girl, 'Do you know who I am?' And she looks at me like I asked for her soul. I mean, these people come into our spaces and act like they deserve equal footing, like they built anything, like they're anything." He laughed, tipping back his drink. The group roared. Ariana's hand tightened slightly around her tray, but her face remained unreadable. A phone in her apron buzzed once. Deshawn's signal. The upload was complete. Every word Julian had just said, every name he'd just slandered, was now recorded, encrypted, and streaming to a secure drive labeled Royce Exposed Live Ops. She began to move through the crowd, offering drinks to executives and their bored-looking dates. Each step calculated, each smile a shield. She passed a group of women in glittering dresses discussing their newest vacation homes. One leaned closer to whisper, "I heard Julian's being targeted by some ex-employee trying to sue him. Can you believe it? Cleaning ladies these days think they're CEOs." "Typical," her friend replied, sipping her cocktail. "Everyone wants a shortcut." Ariana memorized their faces. She reached the back of the rooftop where Julian's executive assistant, Theo, stood fiddling with his phone. Theo was the kind of man who prided himself on being adjacent to power, never important enough to be held accountable, but always close enough to benefit. "Excuse me, sir," Ariana said, offering him a glass of champagne. He looked up, distracted. "Oh yeah, thanks, He glanced at her name tag. "Nina?" She smiled and moved on. Once inside the staff hallway, she slipped through the door marked storage only and exhaled. The overhead light flickered. She pulled out her phone and tapped the mic icon. "Voice logs confirmed," she said. "Target Julian. Status, reckless." Anthony responded almost immediately. "Did you hear what he said about our spaces? He's not even trying to hide it anymore." "Arrogance never hides," Ariana replied. "It brags." She disconnected, pulled off her apron, and exited through the back stairwell. Outside, the wind was cool, sharp against her face. She walked 4 blocks to her rental car, changed clothes in the back seat, and drove to the safe house. a plain apartment in Culver City where she stored all mission-critical equipment. Inside, the windows were blacked out. Multiple screens lined the far wall, each streaming real-time updates from media trackers, legal forums, and encrypted group chats she maintained with whistleblowers. She pulled up the new folder, tonight's recording, and played it back. Julian's voice filled the room. They act like they deserve equal footing. She paused the file and added a tag, segregationist language, Tier 1 evidence. Then she turned to a new document, Press Timeline Draft 2.0, and slotted the quote into Wednesday's press leak. Ariana was no longer collecting evidence. She was building a narrative. And Julian Royce was writing it for her. Across the city, Julian remained blissfully unaware. In fact, over the next few days, he only grew more emboldened. His latest social media post featured a photo of himself on a golf course captioned, "Some people whine, winners play the game." It was his most liked post of the week. Ariana screenshotted it, archived it, and added it to the file. He had no idea the game was already over. 2 nights later, she was back at Royce Tower, not as a cleaner this time, but as a guest. Anthony had secured her a spot at the Chamber of Innovation's formal banquet. Her name on the list was Marissa Grant, a financial consultant from Chicago. Her outfit was a sleek navy gown, her hair swept into a classic bun, and a pair of fake designer heels that clicked authoritatively on the marble floors. Julian was there, of course, grinning, schmoozing, surrounded by men who laughed too quickly and women who smiled too tightly. Ariana stayed at the edge of the room, nursing a glass of mineral water and gathering statements from overconfident donors. But then something unexpected happened. Julian took the stage. He tapped the mic with the confidence of a man used to being amplified. "I just want to thank everyone here tonight," he began, "for continuing to believe in real business, in merit, in standards." The applause was instant. He continued, "There's a lot of noise out there right now. People who want to drag down success because they couldn't build anything themselves. People who clean the floors but think they should own the building." Ariana's jaw tightened. He paused, letting the room chuckle. "But we know better. The natural order of things always prevails." The crowd applauded again. Ariana took out her phone under the tablecloth, hit record, and kept her gaze steady. Back in the shadows of the room, Anthony, also invited, watched from his table. He sent her a message immediately after the speech. That was the nail. "This is defamation, coded hate speech, and retaliation, all public now." Ariana replied with a single word, "broadcast." Deshawn began syncing the audio with a montage, clips of Julian's public interviews, screenshots of whistleblower reports, snippets from earlier recordings, and posts with captions like, "The natural order of things." Within 24 hours, the video was live, and within 36 hours, it had over 1 million views. Celebrities began reposting it. Former employees came forward. Hashtags like Royce Unfiltered and Clean the Top began trending. Influencers recorded TikToks calling out Julian's elitism. Twitter exploded with stories from other victims. Local news picked it up. National outlets followed. Julian Royce's name was everywhere. And not for the reasons he wanted. He responded with a smug tweet, "Can't cancel truth, try harder." Ariana smiled. It was the kind of defiant ignorance she had seen right before every collapse. Behind the scenes, investors began pulling out. 2 sponsors of Royce Holdings' next tech launch quietly withdrew. A keynote speech Julian had been scheduled to give was canceled due to scheduling conflicts. But the most devastating blow came when someone from Julian's own executive board leaked internal documents to Ariana, memos proving that Julian had directly approved retaliatory actions against minority employees, along with cost-saving strategies that involved denying benefits to pregnant workers. It was enough. Anthony made the call. The lawsuit goes live next Monday. Multiple plaintiffs. Press conference Wednesday. Ariana stared at the screen filled with Julian's face frozen mid-speech, his eyes lit with arrogance, his mouth curled into a sneer. "Make sure the venue has good lighting," she said. He always liked being in the spotlight. And then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "I'll be speaking publicly." Anthony was quiet. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." She turned back to the wall of screens, scanning through the last of the comments, the surge of momentum rising like a tidal wave behind her. Julian had declared the game his. But Ariana Bell had rewritten the rules, and the world was about to see what justice looked like. Designed by a woman he once tried to buy for $100, delivered by the very voice he had tried to silence. The morning the world began to turn against Julian Royce, he sat in the penthouse suite of the Langston Hotel, sipping his usual double espresso and flipping through the headlines on his tablet. As always, he wore a robe monogrammed with his initials and a confidence too large for the room. Outside, the skyline of Los Angeles shimmered, smug and golden. Inside, he grinned. The smile faded the moment his notifications began to flood in. He blinked. Royce Unfiltered cleaned the top. Julian Royce exposed, the hidden rot behind a billionaire's smile, CBS investigates. He tapped frantically. There it was. A video professionally edited but raw in tone, already climbing past 2 million views. The title, The Truth Behind the Tower. It began with footage from his latest speech, the one where he'd said, "Cleaners think they own the building," cut seamlessly with reports of racial discrimination, financial fraud, and sealed HR complaints. Then came the audio clips, his own voice, unmistakable, laughing about the natural order of things, offering money to a woman he assumed was an escort, bragging about knowing how to keep people in their place. His face turned pale. His phone rang. It was his assistant, Theo. "Mr. Royce," Theo said, breathless, "you need to get ahead of this. Every news outlet is calling. Your Twitter is blowing up. The board wants an emergency call in 30 minutes. Julian barely heard him. Another ping. Then another. A link from the New York Times. A segment on Good Morning America. And then CNN, live. Ariana Bell, standing calmly at a press conference beside attorney Anthony Lang, a wall of microphones before her, her voice resolute. He dropped his espresso. "I didn't plan to become a symbol," she was saying. "But when power is abused and dignity is stripped away, silence becomes complicity. I chose to speak, not for revenge, but for justice." Julian's hands trembled. Another call came in. His lawyer, Richard Kellerman. Julian answered with a barked, "Fix this." "Julian," Richard said, his voice flat, "it's already out of our hands. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has opened an investigation. The Department of Labor wants your accounting ledgers. Ariana Bell, she's not just some cleaning lady. She runs a forensic consulting firm. She's got receipts. We're talking financial records, tax evasion, whistleblower testimony, internal emails, memos with your signature." Julian stood, heart pounding. "That's impossible. She can't have all that." "She does. And the lawsuit? $50 million in damages, harassment, retaliation, discrimination, defamation. And she's not alone. She's got multiple plaintiffs. And, Julian, they've got the video." "What video?" "The gala. You, offering her money, laughing about her type. It's gone viral. People aren't just angry, they're disgusted." Julian staggered backward, catching himself on the edge of the table. "No one's going to care. These things blow over." "They won't this time," Richard replied, "because she's smart, because she's prepared, and because this time you left fingerprints everywhere." Julian tried to pace, but it felt like his legs were filled with sand. That afternoon, his investors began to pull out, one after another. Emails that began with, "In light of recent revelations," contract terminations, sponsors withdrawing, deals unraveling. The Royce Holdings stock plummeted 22% in one day. Inside the executive tower, chaos reigned. PR teams scrambled. Junior staff wept. Journalists circled like sharks, cameras aimed at the building's entrance. A protest formed outside the headquarters. Dozens of people holding signs that read, "Integrity over power," and "We are not disposable." Meanwhile, Ariana didn't rest. Back at Bell Strategic's downtown office, she and Anthony worked late into the night, surrounded by walls of printed evidence, screens showing media coverage, and files tagged Royce Tier 1 violations. They hadn't just built a lawsuit, they'd built a truth machine, one designed to strip away the myth of Julian Royce and reveal the rot underneath. Ariana sat calmly as Anthony reviewed the latest filings. "You realize," he said, "this isn't just about Julian anymore. The SEC is poking into Royce Holdings. Labor violations, tax fraud, bribery. They're going after the board. You've cracked the entire shell." She looked up. "Good." He studied her. "Do you feel anything? Vengeance? Satisfaction?" She thought for a moment. "I feel weight, the kind that lifts when people see you clearly." Anthony nodded. "You've become a symbol, Ariana, but you're also a precedent." "I didn't want the spotlight," she said, "but if I'm in it, I'll use it." The following day, Julian attempted to launch a damage control campaign. He released a video apology, standing stiffly in front of an American flag, claiming misunderstanding, poor word choice, and insisting he'd always supported diversity. The video backfired spectacularly. The comments were brutal. You supported diversity by firing black women for asking for fair pay? Try apologizing without reading from a teleprompter next time. Your time is up. Meanwhile, Ariana's speech was rebroadcast on nearly every major news channel. She appeared on Anderson Cooper 360, The Daily Show, and PBS NewsHour. Her poise captivated people. Her story inspired them. She spoke with dignity, with data, with clarity. I didn't bring Julian Royce down, she told Trevor Noah. He did that to himself. I just made sure the world saw it. Royce Holdings faced a mass exodus of leadership. The board dissolved. A government-appointed trustee began overseeing company operations. Financial audits uncovered over $150 million in questionable spending. Several executives were arrested. And Julian? His assets were frozen. His penthouse seized. Lawsuits piled high. He moved into a rented apartment in Glendale, alone, bitter, and radioactive. He attempted to pitch a book deal, canceled The Fall of a Businessman, but no publisher touched it. His name was poison. The media called it the Bell Reckoning. Activists called it justice by design. But Ariana? She called it closure. 6 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, she stood on the rooftop of her own firm, gazing out at a city that once ignored her and now echoed her voice. Her team had grown. Bell Strategic now had clients lining up, companies who didn't want to be the next Royce. Ariana's phone buzzed. It was Jennifer, her former supervisor from CleanBright. The message was simple. I saw your interview. I'm so sorry. I should have stood up for you. Your courage helped me speak up too. Thank you. Ariana smiled, then replied, It's never too late to do the right thing. She put her phone down and turned to Anthony, who had just walked in with 2 coffees. Did you hear? He said, handing her one. The new labor bill just passed the House. Modeled after your case, it'll protect contract workers from retaliatory terminations. Ariana sipped her coffee. That's the real win. He looked at her. You changed everything. She looked back at the city, her voice steady. No, I reminded them of something they tried to forget. People like me aren't invisible. We're inevitable. And with that, she turned back to her office, her name etched in gold on the door, carrying not just the weight of what she'd survived, but the power of what she'd built. A legacy no one could take, a voice no one could silence, a place no one could steal. The truth had finally spoken, and it was her. The sound of her name, Ariana Bell, was no longer whispered in backrooms or buried beneath contracts. It was spoken aloud on primetime news, printed in bold on magazine covers, and shared in hashtags that millions now followed like a chant. 6 months after filing the lawsuit, she had become not only a symbol of resistance, but a case study in justice, featured in university lectures, corporate seminars, and legal podcasts. But as the world celebrated her strength, Ariana remained grounded in a truth that few ever saw. The victory hadn't come in one dramatic courtroom slam or viral video. It had come in fragments, in sleepless nights, in quiet resolve, and in the small, personal decisions not to break under the weight of a system designed to crush women like her. It was a gray Thursday afternoon when Anthony walked into her office at Bell Strategic. Rain patterned softly against the tall windows overlooking downtown Los Angeles, casting the city in a cool silver haze. Ariana was reviewing an incoming client's compliance file, her desk a sea of folders and color-coded tabs. She barely looked up as he entered. You see the article? He asked, shaking droplets from his coat. She smiled faintly. Which one? The one in Forbes or Time? Neither, he said, dropping a tabloid on her desk. The headline read, Julian Royce denied board seat by unanimous vote, staff-led protest. Her brows lifted. Anthony sat in the chair across from her, grinning. The company's called Millennium Tech, small outfit in Burbank. Julian tried to slide into their board of advisors. The employees, all women and people of color, organized against it, submitted a petition, made their voices heard. He thought he could still influence, Ariana said. Even now. He thought his name still had weight, Anthony corrected. Turns out it does. Just not the kind he wanted. Ariana picked up the paper, scanned the article. The irony wasn't lost on her. Julian Royce, the man who once mocked diversity hires and used wealth as a weapon, was now being shown the door by people who once cleaned offices like his, filed reports he ignored, lived lives he never thought twice about. "He's learning where his place really is," she murmured. "And for the first time," Anthony added, "he doesn't get to define it." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the rain trail down the glass. Ariana sipped her lukewarm coffee. Her gaze wandered to the awards now lining the office shelves, some from civil rights organizations, others from accounting and legal associations. She hadn't put them there for show. They were reminders, not of what she'd achieved, but of what she'd survived. "You know who surprised me the most?" she said after a moment. "Who?" "Jennifer. Your old supervisor?" "She came in here 2 weeks ago," Ariana said, with tears in her eyes and a trembling apology. Anthony looked intrigued. "And?" "She told me she was sorry for staying silent when she was forced to fire me. That watching my fight inspired her to report her own boss, who had been covering up harassment cases in their cleaning contracts." Ariana leaned back in her chair, her voice soft but steady. She said, "Courage is contagious." Anthony smiled. "It is. You infected half the country." She gave a small laugh. "I just lit a match. The kindling was already there." Later that week, Ariana received an invitation that made her pause. It came from Columbia Business School, her alma mater. They were hosting a summit on ethics, resilience, and corporate accountability. They wanted her to be the keynote speaker. She hesitated before replying. There was something sacred, almost too full circle, about returning to a place where she used to clean bathrooms between classes. She remembered her janitor uniform stuffed in her locker, the long nights studying under flickering lights, the sting of condescension from professors who never learned her name. But then she thought of the students now. The ones cleaning, the ones hiding, the ones surviving. And she replied yes. When the day arrived, she walked onto the Columbia campus not as a former cleaner, not as a forgotten student, but as a force. She wore a slate gray suit, simple and elegant. Her hair was swept back, her steps unhurried. The auditorium was packed. Faculty members, alumni, and hundreds of business students filled the seats, whispering excitedly as she took the stage. The applause was thunderous. She waited for it to settle. Then she leaned into the mic and her voice filled the hall. "I used to scrub the floors of this building," she began. "Clean its restrooms, wipe its windows. Back then, most of you wouldn't have noticed me. Or if you did, you wouldn't have wondered what dreams I carried, what battles I was fighting, or what systems I was navigating just to be here." The room grew still. But I knew who I was, and I knew what I wanted. Even when others tried to define me by my uniform, by my address, by my skin, I didn't forget my name, and I never accepted the role they assigned. Her gaze swept across the crowd, landing briefly on a row of young black students in the front, their eyes wide and shining. "Underestimating someone based on their current role," she continued, "is the most expensive mistake you can make. The person you disrespect today may be the one rewriting your future tomorrow." The applause returned, louder now, laced with emotion. Afterward, students flooded her with questions, selfies, gratitude. One young man, probably 19, lingered at the edge of the crowd. He finally stepped forward, his voice hesitant. "Ms. Bell," he said, "how did you not lose yourself through all of it?" She looked at him, remembering 16-year-old Ariana, fists clenched on a curb as her mother wept over a job lost to shame. She thought of that gala floor, of the $100 bill, of her mother's calloused hands and quiet strength. "Because I learned something early," she said gently. "Humiliation only works if you accept the story someone else is trying to write for you. But if you hold on to your own truth, really hold it, no one can take that from you. Not ever." He nodded, eyes brimming. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, as Ariana walked through the city, she passed by the Langston Hotel, the site of Julian's downfall. A banner hung outside now hiring, cleaners, competitive pay, inclusive workplace. She almost laughed. Inside, the ballroom where she had once been propositioned had been completely remodeled. Rumor had it that part of the renovation included a small memorial plaque in the lobby, dedicated to victims of workplace discrimination. She didn't need to see it. The victory was already in motion. She reached her Upper East Side apartment just after midnight. The city glowed below her like a nervous heart, restless and bright. She poured a glass of water, stood by the window, and allowed herself, finally, to exhale. It was done. Not just the fall of Julian Royce, but the beginning of something larger. She had turned a wound into a weapon, a dismissal into a declaration, a humiliation into a movement. And she had done it on her terms. No screaming, no vengeance. Just precision, truth, and the unwavering belief that integrity beats cruelty, even when it seems like the world has forgotten how. Ariana Bell had once been a ghost in the room. Now, she was the one who built it. On a brisk October morning, just over a year after the first cracks appeared in Julian Royce's carefully constructed empire, Ariana Bell stood alone in her office, watching the sunrise spill gold over the steel bones of Manhattan. Her company, Bell Strategic and Associates, had grown into one of the most respected corporate auditing firms in the country. Its name, once whispered behind closed doors with skepticism or suspicion, now carried the weight of credibility, change, and fearless truth-telling. The woman who had once been offered $100 for her silence now commanded boardrooms with a glance. Her assistant, Thomas, stepped into the room, holding a fresh batch of folders. He was young, sharp, and unshakably loyal. "We have 3 new companies requesting full-spectrum audits," he said, placing the files neatly on her desk. All of them cited the Royce case as the reason. Ariana nodded, smiling faintly. Of course they did. She took one of the folders, flipping it open. The client was a global apparel brand facing internal whistleblower claims. In the old days, firms like this would have hired expensive crisis PR or buried their secrets behind NDAs. Now they came to her, to prevent being the next Royce. Irony was a sharp blade, and Ariana had learned to wield it. The lawsuit against Julian Royce had long since been decided. She'd won $50 million in damages. But more importantly, the case had triggered a sweeping federal investigation that led to new labor protections for contract and freelance workers across the country. The Bell-Royce Act, as it was unofficially known, now made it illegal to terminate a contracted employee for reporting harassment, discrimination, or labor violations. Ariana didn't care about the glory. She cared that people like her mother, women who scrubbed floors and raised children while being invisible to the powerful, finally had protection. Finally had a voice. Julian, on the other hand, had lost everything. Royce Holdings had been dismantled, piece by piece, in a series of court-mandated liquidations. The once vaunted tower that bore his family name had been sold off and converted into affordable tech co-working spaces. His personal fortune, once estimated at $400 million, had evaporated under the weight of lawsuits, fines, and settlements. Last anyone checked, he was living in a modest apartment in Queens, doing freelance consulting work for small businesses that either didn't know or didn't care who he used to be. Ariana had no interest in following his downfall. She hadn't checked his name in over 6 months. Revenge is fire, her mother once told her. But healing, that's water. It moves slower, but it lasts longer. Ariana chose water. That afternoon, as she was reviewing a compliance matrix for an energy company, Thomas knocked again. "There's someone here to see you," he said. "Didn't have an appointment. Says she doesn't need one." Ariana raised an eyebrow. "Name?" He hesitated. "Jennifer Phelps." The name landed like a soft echo. Jennifer, her old supervisor, the woman who'd once called to tell her she was being blacklisted from corporate events, the one who, albeit reluctantly, had played a part in pushing her out. Ariana nodded. "Send her in." Jennifer entered quietly, her eyes damp but determined. She looked different, older somehow, but lighter too, like someone who had finally stopped running from herself. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me," she said. "I never forget someone who made a hard call," Ariana replied. Jennifer looked down. "I came to apologize. I know it's late, maybe too late." "It's not," Ariana said softly. Jennifer sat, twisting a tissue in her hands. "I was scared. Back then, I had rent, a sick daughter, no backup plan. When they told me to take you off the list, I did it, and it's haunted me every day since." Ariana listened. "I watched your case unfold," Jennifer continued, voice breaking. "And I saw you stand in front of the world with more grace than any of us deserved. It made me want to do better, so I did. I filed my own reports. I exposed my boss for silencing complaints. I spoke to the Labor Commission. I thought, maybe I could help someone else the way you helped me, without even knowing it." Ariana reached across the table and placed her hand over Jennifer's. You did the right thing, she said, when it mattered most. Jennifer gave a shaky laugh. I still don't know how you held your dignity through it all. Because dignity doesn't come from the people who try to take it, Ariana said. It comes from knowing who you are, even when the world pretends not to see you. When Jennifer left, Ariana didn't return to her desk right away. She walked to the window again, watching the city pulse with motion and noise and stories. So many stories. How many voices had been silenced before hers? How many had fought and lost because no one listened? That night, she received another invitation, this one from the National Labor Equality Foundation. They were launching a campaign called We See You, aimed at amplifying the stories of workers whose battles often went unnoticed. They wanted Ariana to be the face of the launch. She agreed. At the event, held in the renovated Royce Tower, now renamed the Equity Building, she took the stage in front of hundreds. Former janitors, waitresses, freelancers, assistants, interns, immigrant workers, gig workers, people whose lives, like hers, had been painted invisible by wealth and arrogance. She looked at them, her voice clear and unwavering. Power doesn't always look like what we think. It's not always a corner office or a last name carved in stone. Sometimes it's in the quiet defiance of someone who chooses not to bow. Sometimes it's in the way we rise again and again after being told we don't belong. And sometimes it's in the decision to speak, even when no one is listening. Yet. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Ariana didn't bask in the applause. She let it pass through her, like a wind clearing away the dust of the past. Later, as she walked through the marble lobby of the building that once symbolized her humiliation, she noticed a new plaque installed by the elevators. It was small, brushed steel, elegant. It read, "In honor of those whose voices were once dismissed, may they never be again. Ariana Bell, Justice Advocate." She paused for only a second before moving on. Weeks passed. Her firm expanded. She opened an office in Atlanta, then Chicago, then Nairobi. One morning, while reviewing a pitch deck from a foreign telecom group, she received a message on her private inbox. The subject line simply read, "Bell for Senate?" She blinked. The body of the email was from a grassroots political organization. They believed her story had ignited a movement, that her voice wasn't just suited for justice behind a desk, but in shaping policy on the Senate floor. They weren't asking for a decision, just a conversation. Ariana closed her laptop and walked to her window. The city, as always, moved like a giant, breathing thing. But this time, it didn't intimidate her. It didn't define her. She thought of her mother, of the floor tiles she once scrubbed, of the dreams Ariana whispered to herself while pushing a mop bucket past rooms full of people who never saw her. She wasn't a maid anymore. She was a blueprint. She picked up her phone and dialed Anthony. "You busy?" she asked. "Always," he said, "but not for you." "I just got a very interesting message," she said. "Oh," she smiled. "What would you say if I told you someone wants me to run for Senate?" There was a pause. "I'd say," Anthony said slowly, "that the country might finally be ready for someone who knows how to clean things up." Ariana laughed. But deep down, something clicked. Because maybe that was always the point. Not to burn the empire, but to rebuild it with people who never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. People like her. And so, standing tall in an office built with earned respect, under a name the world now recognized, Ariana Bell let the idea settle in her chest. Not as a fantasy, but as a next step, a new beginning, and perhaps, just perhaps, her greatest victory yet. In the end, Ariana Bell's story is not just about justice. It's about the quiet power of knowing your worth, even when the world tries to strip it away. She didn't fight back with anger or vengeance, but with precision, intelligence, and an unshakable belief that dignity is not something others give you, it's something you carry within. Her journey reminds us that no matter how invisible society tries to make you feel, your voice has the power to shake empires. Your truth can outlast lies, and your presence, when grounded in integrity, can rewrite history. This story teaches us that injustice often hides behind polished smiles and marble floors, but it cannot survive the light of truth. And sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not with a roar, but with a woman quietly refusing to accept less than she deserves. So wherever you are right now, whether you're sitting in an office, riding the bus, or taking your lunch break, remember this. You are not too small to matter. You are not too powerless to fight back. And your story might just be the key to someone else's freedom. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or simply made you think, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this. Together, let's keep amplifying voices that deserve to be heard.